I can personally confirm the latest AMA report. Excessive video game playing leads to irritable bowel syndrome.
Released in 2004 exclusively for the PlayStation 2 and developed by Black Ops Entertainment and published by Vivendi Universal Games and Sierra Entertainment, it's the X-Files Resist or Serve. In the X-Files Resist or Serve, you play as either FBI agent Mulder or Scully, as they both have their own separate campaign telling the story from their own perspectives. The gameplay is also slightly different for each of their campaigns. Mulder's campaign is primarily more action-oriented. Well, as action-oriented as a Resident Evil clone can get in terms of combat, you basically shoot and kick things a bunch. Meanwhile, Scully's campaign is more primarily puzzle and investigation focused. You'll have to solve plenty of puzzles around the environment, as well as some investigative stuff, and the boss fights as well are somewhat more puzzle-based in comparison to Mulder's. And you'll have to do some autopsies and such like Scully does on the show. Now as for the story, the game takes place during the 7th season of the show, and without spoiling anything, the aliens have gotten into the zombie-making business, Mulder finds an alien-killing stiletto, and Cancer Man and Krychek are up to no good it would seem. So if you're an X-Files fan, you know things are going down. But is it any good? Let's find out with the good.
Mulder!
What's down there?
Your future, Mulder.
You want to keep talking in riddles, or do you want to tell me what it is?
Probably the best thing for me personally about this game was simply the fact it's, well, the X-Files. I'm personally a massive X-Files fan. I've watched the entire series twice over as well as the movies, and own the entire show as well, and this game does a damn good job for a big property licensed video game at attempting to appeal to its fans almost 2 years after the show aired its final episode. The X-Files Resist or Serve has everything you could potentially want in an X-Files video game. The main cast of the show, David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson, reprise their roles and voice their own characters, Mulder and Scully. The game also has a ton of references and quips from the show itself.
I think this is actually smaller than Mulder's collection.
And a number of fan-favorite characters appearing in the game as well, such as the lone gunman.
Come on, I know you're there.
State your name and business.
Guys, it's Mulder.
Who?
Spooky, come on, I don't have a lot of time.
Hey, Mulder. What can we do you for?
Mulder? Is the lovely Agent Scully with you this evening?
Just assure me that you're all wearing pants.
Agent Mulder, where are you calling from?
To the infamous Smoky Man. And for the most part, the story is pretty solid and is actually broken up into episodes as well, and act as lost episodes within the 7th season. Hell, it even features the iconic intro and theme of the show at the start of each episode, and even plays out like an episode from the show at the start of each one, with episode names and everything. The game also features plenty of behind-the-scenes footage as well, including plenty of B-roll footage from many of the casts of the game, including the Smoky Man and the Lone Gunman, and most of it is just pure comedy gold. Like seriously, what the hell is up with all the lipstick?
It's a game, Dean! It's a game!
Right. This'll all be cut.
But sadly, there isn't any David Duchovny or Gillian Anderson footage or B-rolls. As for the gameplay side of things, it's basically a Resident Evil / Silent Hill clone, but honestly, it does a damn good job at being one. And throw in some X-Files and you've got a pretty perfect blend for a horror game. The controls overall are also fairly solid despite even being tank controls, and I quickly adjusted to them and never really had any problems once I did throughout my 8 to 10 hours or so I've spent with the game so far. The game also features plenty of replayability since you have 2 different perspectives to play the game from, each with their own unique segments and areas. Mulder, for example, has a number of more spooky related things like this nightmare sequence that even features those pesky aliens, and a familiar face for X-Files fans. Whereas Scully's campaign features a lot more puzzle solving and investigation, as well as those neat autopsy sections that I mentioned earlier. But I primarily recorded Mulder's campaign for this review. But now let's discuss the bad.
Hello?
Say goodbye to Mulder for me.
Krychek?
Run!
Now, probably my biggest issue with Resist or Serve is just how mind-numbingly repetitive, but also not to mention easy it is to kill the zombies in this game. Like seriously, this right here will sum up about 60% of the game. combat in this game is just extremely dull. You'll be wanting to just avoid the zombies altogether just so you won't have to go through the trouble of killing them. And worse yet, they don't get any harder or have any major variation or inconsistencies to them throughout the whole game, except for the boss fights. Even at later sections in the game, it's just the exact same formula. Shoot them once or twice, then hit them to death to conserve ammo. Because trust me, if you plan on playing this, you'll need it for the boss fights. It's very, very tedious. And this also applies for Scully's campaign as well. When you're not doing puzzle solving or autopsies, you're doing this half the time. So after beating Mulder's campaign, I honestly didn't want to play through another 7 to 8 hours of more or less the same stuff. So I only played a single episode for Scully just to see if it had any major changes, and aside from a few different perspectives and more puzzle solving, it's mostly the same thing. But speaking of the bosses, they're for the most part also extremely easy as well. Take for example this boss. As soon as he appeared on screen, I just opened fire and he died in seconds.
That was easy.
And this was in the final episode of the game. Now, keep in mind I said for the most part they're pretty easy. Like, for example, fighting one zombie clone of a girl with psychic powers wasn't too bad, then throw 3 of them into the mix an hour later and it becomes a complete mess. And then on top of that, you fight another boss right after, who then summons them back from the dead, all while having to protect Scully as well during the fight. And this is in the first episode of the campaign. And after doing some research after getting my ass handed to me, it turns out you can kill this boss in seconds, like the previous one I showed you, by simply standing on the side of the catwalk and shooting him as soon as the fight starts. Fantastic boss design. Not to mention the final boss, who is easily one of the most frustrating boss fights I've had in recent memory, but I won't spoil it. But while we're on the topic of protecting Scully, this game also has a number of escort segments where you have to protect Scully from what I've played in Mulder's campaign, because those are always fun, including this awful mine section where you have to stay near her at all times, otherwise she can't see anything, all while being attacked by numerous zombies, as well as another section where you have to protect Scully as she performs an autopsy, while an endless amount of zombies keep pouring into the small room. Thankfully, however, these moments in the game are pretty rare. And probably my next issue, although much more minor, is the camera at times to be very wonky. But now let's discuss the ugly, where we discuss the graphics, technical aspects, soundtrack, and general presentation of the game. Now, graphically, Resistor Serve is a pretty solid looking game. It has a nice attention to detail in the environments, all while being pretty spooky to explore with a great atmosphere, especially in the first episode, all while having a number of references to the show, which is always a plus for me. As for the character models, they look okay at best. Considering this is a PlayStation 2 game, however, I can't complain too much. I'm also happy to say with my 8 to 10 hours I've spent with the game so far, I never ran into any bugs or technical issues aside from some minor clipping issues. As for the soundtrack side of things, it's pretty damn good and sets the tone nicely, especially when the zombies are up and about. But I did notice at times after clearing out a whole area or room of zombies, the intense music just kept going. Which kind of got annoying when he then had to explore or do some puzzle solving or investigating around the same area, and it just keeps playing for no reason. As for the voice acting, it's pretty varied. Early on in the game, it was pretty easy to notice how bored they were reading the script, and it was pretty awful.
Come on, Deputy. Stay with me. No. Damn it. Damn it.
But oddly enough, by the end of the game, the voice acting became much better.
But to reach the end, you must listen to this advice. Resist or serve.
Maybe they were getting into the story or the script by this point, or maybe it's because they knew it was almost over and could get their paychecks and go home. So then David Duchovny could go do more of this then instead.
You fucked my mom.
I fucked your mom. I fucked your mom.
Now, despite all my complaints and issues, I still had a lot of fun with the X-Files Resistor Serve. It's a fairly decent Resident Evil clone, and the story was interesting enough to keep me playing. But at the end of the day, I'd only recommend this to X-Files fans. I also have a big shout out and thank you to give to my co-host Sam, aka Seraph, who got me this game as a birthday gift, so thank you. But now, it's time for my rating. God, are those jiggle physics?
Even if they aren't, look at the size of that rat. Oh my god. Gillian Anderson, ladies and gentlemen. Look how big they are.
Out of 10.